Hi there, I'm Tom Field. I'm Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. Very pleased to welcome you to today's session. The topic is building long-term security assets, an investment model for sustainable cybersecurity defense. We're joined today by Bruce Johnson. He's Senior Director, Enterprise Security with TechStream, and Rob Jansen, who is Chief Executive Officer with TechStream. Now, before I invite them onto our virtual stage, some background on our session today. Establishing an investment-based platform that represents a lasting security asset for customers independent of involvement allows for persistent value and a solution that matures customers in their use. The technology is incorporated, as well as growth in cybersecurity competence. In this webinar, you'll learn how data from different business units is protected but not shared. And by participating in a SOC, it can have a dedicated SIEM environment, full autonomy to hunt and modify threat alerting independently, maintain data autonomy, and publish identified threats as a shared incident response platform. Now, some background on my organization. Information Security Media Group is a global education and intelligence firm. We're based in the US in Princeton, New Jersey, and you may know us by any number of our 37 media properties. These include Bank Info Security, Data Breach Today, and OT.Today. In all, we reach an audience of over 1.3 million security and technology leaders globally and give them a daily diet of news, analysis, research, events, and educational programs just like this one. Just a few notes of housekeeping. If you have any questions for our guests today, you can submit them anytime via the chat window on your screen. I may not get to every question, but for everyone we don't answer today, we will get a response back to you via email. Should you encounter technical issues while viewing today's webinar, take down the email address you see on your screen. If you write to webinars at ismg.io, we've got support staff standing by to help. And a reminder, today's webinar is copyrighted material. If you would like to use any of the information presented today, or if you're looking for customized training material, please contact us. I'm thrilled to introduce our sponsor today, TechStream. TechStream accelerates clients' digital transformation by navigating complex technology environments with a combination of technical expertise and staffing solutions. They guide client decisions, quickly implement the right technologies with the right people, keep them running for sustainable growth. Their battle-tested processes and methodology help companies with legacy systems get to the cloud faster so they can be agile, reduce costs, and improve operational efficiencies. With hundreds of deployments under their belt, they can guarantee on-time and on-budget project delivery. I also want to introduce sponsor Splunk. Splunk helps organizations around the world turn data into doing. Splunk technology is designed to investigate, monitor, analyze, and act on data at any scale. Splunk's powerful platform and unique approach to data have empowered companies to improve service levels, reduce operations costs, mitigate risk, enhance DevOps collaboration, and create new product and service offerings. To learn more, visit splunk.com. Let's meet our speakers. Bruce Johnson's got over 38 years of experience in the IT industry, including security, infrastructure architecture, software development, management of multiple portfolios. He has experience in Splunk, security solutions, cloud migration, portal, content workflow, integration, and project management. Again, he's Senior Director, Enterprise Security with TechStream. Let's introduce Rob Jansen. He's CEO of TechStream. In this role, he leads daily business operations and oversees the development and execution of the company's growth strategy and initiatives. Been in the IT sector for more than 25 years, providing leadership, consulting, and implementation services to leading Fortune 1000 clients. Rob, Bruce, welcome to this discussion today.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
Rob, I want to start the conversation with you. What would you say is most challenging about the current SOC investment model?
Yeah, and I thought it'd be helpful to lend maybe a little bit of a business context to the conversation today. I know we typically have a lot of technical CISOs and IT people on the phone, but I lead and speak with a lot of C-level and board level people that often fund some of these conversations. And everyone's familiar with the typical challenge: shortage of labor, plethora of tools, swivel chair type of challenges, the rate of change in IT, things like GenAI, et cetera. But nobody's really talking about the big issue out there, the elephant in the room. We keep spending more on cybersecurity, but the bad guys are winning, right? There's not a day that goes by that there's not a data breach, a fine being talked about, a large ransomware. So at the macro, the bad guys are winning, so to speak. So we see companies, day after day turning to, outsourced vendors to help them with their cybersecurity needs, like a managed security provider. And oftentimes they're changing those providers every 1 or 3 years. And the challenge in that is that every time they change that provider, they're starting over from scratch. They're bringing in, having to change over their data sources. They're having to change their searches. They're having to change their response and remediation processes. And during that changeover, it's not only costing them a lot of money, but they're having to, they're vulnerable at that point in time. So we've really looked at the model differently, and we've basically born out of our pedigree in consulting, we've really looked at a model of how can we provide our customers a way to build a collaborative model where we work with them over time, where they're not beholden to us as the provider. How do we have a model where they can leverage us? We're always there. We're thought leaders. We're providing them value. We're their safety net. But how do they have a model that allows them to mature and allows them to effectively, if they ever had to leave us, which by the way, that's never happened, doesn't leave them high and dry, so to speak, for their future.
So a follow-up question for you, Rob. Where do you see the future of the managed security services model trending? It's evolved a lot just the past few years.
Yeah, I think kind of similar to that first point, some of the complexities out there is that it's really hard so everyone's obviously spending a lot of money on cybersecurity. Everyone knows the stakes out there, right? The breaches that are happening, the ransomware attacks, but it's really hard to know where to make those investments, right? Where do the corporations have the biggest amount of risk? Where are they going to make the investments to have the biggest impact? So that's one of those areas of where we're seeing an area of improvement where we can actually identify and help companies figure out where they can make the biggest impact of those investments. Another area is to figure out, movement from a response-oriented model to more of a proactive or preemptive approach. By definition, if we're responding to an incident, it's already happened, right? So someone's already been inside your environment. There's already been a data exfil. There's already been a command and control. By definition, that's already happened. So how can we move more upstream to, moving from a model that's say a 90% response type of model to say a more of a 70% preemptive or proactive model to say, a 70-30, so 70% proactive to a 30% reactive model. And then lastly, and this is what's really happening in that boardroom, kind of back to where we're assessing the spend of cybersecurity. Nobody out there in the industry, and we speak to the Gartners of the world and some of the other leading analysts, nobody's really talking about how the investments are actually making companies quantitatively safer. So nobody's really looking at the metrics where over time, how am I better 90 days into a partnership with a vendor or an investment in a new cybersecurity tool? How is my mean time to detection getting better? How is my mean time to resolution getting better? How am I getting, in the context of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, how am I shifting left over time in the MITRE ATT&CK framework where I'm going from, in the far right, which is obviously really bad, as most of you on the phone or in the webinar probably know. How am I moving from incidents happening on the right-hand side of the MITRE ATT&CK framework to the left side over time with my vendor or my tool investments? So those are some of the trends that we are seeing that from a managed security perspective that we're working on with our clients.
Very good. Excellent context, Rob. Great to get this conversation started. Bruce, I want to bring you to the discussion now. Talk to me about your incident response platform and what makes it unique. Now, you and I have had conversations before, but here's a chance to level set. What makes this unique?
So there are a few different factors that I would point to. One is the way that we've architected this solution to allow for or to enable autonomy for individual business units, while at the same time providing incident response, automated incident response with security analysts in a common shared platform. It allows us to establish standards, but also to enable different business units to have their, individually owned Splunk environments. In this case, all of our solution is kind of built on top of Splunk for the purpose of this discussion, certainly. And the ability for each of the business units to maintain a separate Splunk environment with complete and total data autonomy, as well as kind of pull it together into a structured framework for our security analysts. It is a fundamentally collaborative solution. I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but in our case, it means that customers are able to participate in incident response, and obviously that has an impact on the amount of work that we do, as well as the cost of solution. And our automation is not just focused on, the automation of detection or the automation of response when a threat is found. It does that, but we also focus on a macro level, on a higher level of abstraction to automate the overall MDR process, which includes automated scripting, provisioning, onboarding of data ingestion. It includes the automated sharing of incident awareness and the coordinated kind of incident response so that we can look across the ecosystem from one dashboard and kind of track any given threat, especially if it's shared.
Now, Bruce, you describe this as an investment-based model. When you say that, what exactly do you mean?
Yeah, I think Rob was kind of pointing to that when he spoke about our pedigree in consulting, because as consultants, we're really focused on enabling our customers with technology. And we've kind of taken that approach on somewhat of a unique level in terms of this solution. So kind of our traditional focus in terms of customer retention, which as Rob mentioned is around 100%. That really is for us, allows us to take some risk in terms of sharing intellectual property. So there are kind of a few factors there. One is obviously enabling the customer to build an asset and invest in that asset for the long term, as well as investing in best practices in cybersecurity, which we share. We also feel that a lot of factors in the industry are driving us toward that type of decision as well. A lot of the generation of detections with AI or LLMs to generate searches and processes are making makes for a challenge for customers that hang their customer loyalty on publishing that IP or some kind of contract. We leverage, for our model, our focus is on service excellence. So the customer isn't necessarily locked into us as a provider for the service. And if that should change for some reason, which obviously there's a very low risk of that, they retain the investment they've made. They don't start over, as Rob mentioned.
Yeah.
Chris, I want to talk you through some of the potential benefits here, one by one. Talk about the ability to up-level technology, please.
Sure. So I mentioned a little bit about the automation around the platform. And I guess what I mean is that we don't just use Splunk as a data platform. It's not just a database for us. It is for a lot of other MDR providers who tend to build kind of proprietary or overlapping solutions for what Splunk provides out of the box. Our focus has been on overall MDR automation that leverages the existing Splunk platform and all of the detections and all of the investments that they made in terms of incident response, in terms of detection with their SIEM, in terms of the AI models that they're adopting. So it leverages all of that and rides on top of it. So what I mean by that is, we leverage the API into Splunk's environments, whether it's Splunk Cloud or on-prem, and we push assets into that environment, leveraging the API, obviously on an authenticated basis. In fact, the customers own the license, so they only grant access to us to be able to push assets up into those environments. But the ability, because we have invested heavily in interacting with that backend, that has facilitated all of our ability to do shared incident response across multiple platforms and to scale organically as well. So as we implement for a customer, if that is to extend to another business unit and we need to deploy another Splunk environment, we can grow it organically and leverage the same security practices.
Chris, what can you share about distributed architecture?
So I mentioned it briefly. Obviously data sovereignty is pretty key for different business units. So the ability to adapt to different requirements overseas versus GRC requirements domestically, which entail different retention and different requirements. The data sovereignty is very, very tricky. Requirements are very, very different across business units. And so we enable that. We allow our individual business units for any given corporation to operate independently with their own security needs, and then come back into multi-tenant kind of dedicated SOAR environment.
Of course, one of the most compelling benefits is the shared incident response platform. I'm sure you got plenty to say about that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the aspects, and I probably will show it, I think a graphic is worth more words. So I'll just maybe share my screen real briefly, Tom, and kind of show you what I mean. We kind of use a neighborhood watch concept. Can you see my screen at this point? This little neighborhood graphic?
Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you.
I can see it.
So this is a lot easier to kind of walk through to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So you can see we have a neighborhood here with different business units in different industries with different security demands, one of those international potentially. And we have a neighborhood with a white van that's basically coming into the neighborhood, trying to sell candy to our kids. Someone notices that suspicious van, reports it, calls it out to our security analysts. It's not just the IOC or the IP that's being shared, it's also threat awareness. It's the context of that threat and all of the metadata. We're able to see that threat in real time and even capture snapshots of the threat in progress. So when we're doing the context for threat awareness and remediation, we're able to see a threat in progress, almost like a virus outbreak, and take snapshots of that so that we can prioritize how we remediate that threat across different customers and what's required for each of those customers. So we can do that from one dashboard. Does that make it a little bit decent illustration there, Tom?
It does, and I think it actually helps to illustrate the next point as well, which is you bring industry-leading best practices and standards. You can sort of see that in action in your graphic.
Yeah, for sure. So in addition to obviously sharing the incident response or coordinated incident response, we are constantly propagating new detections and new processes that we implement for each of our customers. We're constantly promoting those and propagating those out within days. The other thing that, the proactive nature of implementing new detections as we're remediating means that everybody gets to share in what any of our companies or anyone within an enclave or a JSOC detects as a new threat. And in most cases, without really even implementing a new use case, we can, in real time, somebody finds a malicious IP, it's blocked for everyone within 5 minutes. So it's one of those things that we can propagate remediation in many cases in real time across any of our customers.
Bruce, take a step back. How was this model developed and where was it developed?
Yeah, the history of this architecture and this model, initially it was in kind of a higher ed environment. Or a multi-agency types of environments where it necessitated us expanding a solution to multiple agencies with a lot of kind of coordinated automation, as we've been talking about. So in that context, they demanded kind of individualized SIM environments with common incident response, which is where it came from. So we're expanding this solution from higher ed to large organizations in the context of cybersecurity that are potentially doing downsizing exercises. So we find that in the context of higher ed, we developed a workforce development model that allowed for or facilitated training of cybersecurity professionals. And that was kind of the precursor to us being largely collaborative about our solution. So what that means for a commercial entity is that we can have your employees working side by side with our security analysts to handle incidents. And the other thing that enables is corporations to make, to take advantage of economies of scale, to volume purchases, to obviously drive down the cost of the inherent licenses and the MDR service for their entire organization across business units. It also allows them to drive down the cost of the service by including their own employees in the context of, as security analysts that collaborate with us in the context of incident response. And obviously, we take the ugly hours, nights, weekends, and holidays, but they're able to drive down the cost because our cost is based on incident response. That is the measure of how much work we are doing, incidents themselves. That's how much work we are doing to keep our customers safe. And obviously, if we can collaborate on that, we have less work to do. So that is fundamentally that ability to train people in the context of potential downsizing, or the ability to collaborate in the context of incident response, again, kind of shows the fundamental partnering that's involved with our solution.
And Bruce, I think you bring up a good point, especially in the commercial, even in the commercial space. And even though this solution was born somewhat, the collaborative workforce development part was born out of the higher ed space, it certainly applies in commercial. Given the talent shortage, given the rising cost of cybersecurity talent, this certainly applies to commercial entities, because while there could be downsizing in certain areas of a commercial entity, it doesn't mean that those same resources couldn't use the same training and maturation capability that TechStream has to take those same resources and turn them into cybersecurity engineers and
that's exactly
include them in the service for that commercial entity. So I know a number of commercial organizations that have modernization efforts that are taking maybe mainframe or other systems where maybe those personnel no longer have a skill set that's as applicable to where they're going in cloud, or maybe they're moving to a SaaS-based application. Those same resources who have been 20 plus years at that organization can still add a ton of value, and they could easily move into this type of a managed security type of service. So it's something for our commercial entities to think about. It's not just applicable in a higher ed or state and local government or federal government type of application.
Yeah, given the gap in the need for cybersecurity professionals, retraining and repurposing people that don't necessarily have a cybersecurity background is what we are focused on. It's essentially a VOTEC program, which initially had a lot of applicability in higher ed because they were basically producing academic folks and not security analysts. And we've just had demand for the commercial space in the context of downsizing so that we can retrain and repurpose people to be very useful.
So Bruce, over the course of this year, you and I have talked several times about the student-run SOC you developed at LSU, your higher ed case study. What other case studies or use cases can you share with us here today?
Yeah, so the best example, we adopted it initially in this space for a customer that had to extend our solution to an overseas subsidiary, an overseas business unit. And obviously, it was in Europe. Obviously, they had GDPR requirements. They had very different retention requirements. They had different applications to be monitored and different data sources to be onboarding. So the challenge was, fundamentally from a security perspective, was that they were also falling prey to some of the same hacks. The same hackers were able to move laterally from one business unit to another with the right privileges. So they were being affected by the same hacks. And so fundamentally the domestic business unit wanted to, extend their security practices while also respecting the obviously very different security needs that they had overseas. And so this same architecture to enable data sovereignty for that overseas business unit allowed us to adopt this model specifically for that purpose. So they had a separate SIM environment dedicated to their counterpart overseas, and we were able to do some collaborative work in that environment. They are able to create their own searches, they're able to create their own dashboards, but yet have all of the published incidents come back to the automation platform. So it was a really great use of the solution.
Gentlemen, before we wrap up our conversation, I'd like to ask you both, Rob, Bruce, what would you say is the compelling business case for this investment model? And what are some of the potential returns that our attendees ought to be considering today?
I'll let Rob answer
yeah,
that.
I'll jump in on a few. I know we've covered a couple, but just to recap, I mean, I think the first is especially for the customers on the line that many of which have probably been through this. The investment model, first and foremost, is not to be beholden to an outsourced provider. That's the first part of this. Many of you have been through it. When you switch, it is just a massive upheaval. You're starting from scratch, and it's a very expensive proposition. And many of you have been through that. So that's the first thing that we're trying to avoid. Secondly, I think that part that we just touched on, which honestly wasn't even necessarily part of the thought of the talk track, was you can save a lot of money. If you outsource your security problem fully, it's a very expensive proposition, generally speaking, for most organizations. And we feel like our model is the best combination of what you want to do. If you want to outsource all of it to a company like TechStream, I'm sure we're happy to do that for you. But we feel like a collaborative model is a much more cost-effective and realistic way for most companies to do it today. So the combination of a collaborative model that takes advantage of your smart resources that can be trained in using our professionals, as Bruce mentioned, complemented with the ugly hours, 365, 24/7, 365, ugly hours, domestic. It is the right balance, especially in today's constrained environment. So we think that's another aspect. The third thing, and I think this, to me, especially given the boardroom conversations, the C-level conversations, the conversations that are not happening, but that haven't been happening, but they are because of budgets and because of the macro state of the union where we started the conversation. The investment that we're making in cybersecurity has to start to show quantitative change. We can't just keep throwing money at the problem and it not make a difference. And that's why this is becoming a board level conversation. It's obviously board level because companies don't want to be in the news, right? And obviously now there's becoming more, there's federal regulations, there's financial service regulations, there's going to be more compliance regulations, but nobody wants to be in the news. Nobody wants to be have a data breach, et cetera. But it still comes back to quantitative conversation of, is a dollar that I'm spending making me safer? And companies and corporations really aren't looking at that. And I don't think their vendors are really looking at that. And we've been spending a lot of time helping come up with those metrics. I mentioned a few. And I feel if your vendor is not having a collaborative partner discussion of how they're going to do that with you and showing and working with you on how that investment is showing that return, then you're probably not having that right investment. So I think part of this conversation needs to become, back to your question, a compelling business case. This needs to become an ROI conversation. Boards and C-levels aren't giving our companies anymore an open checkbook. It's an important checkbook, but it's not an open checkbook. So it's got to become more of an ROI focused conversation and focused on where those, on a risk-based model, where the investment is going to have the biggest impact to lower the quantitative risk to the organization. So those are a few points from my perspective. Bruce?
Yeah, no, you hit on that kind of mitigation of residual risk perspective. I know we do a lot of high-level risk analysis work now, Robin, and I think that the ability to quantitatively measure that risk and then implement a plan to mitigate that risk, and then with metrics and the kinds of dashboards that we include in our solution, particularly the one we love the best is that shift left metric that shows our hackers are more active in reconnaissance now than they are to the right of persistence. That is to me one of the metrics, and there are multiple that demonstrate that your solution is being effective, and you can trend that over time to look and see whether or not that's true. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And Tom, I'll leave you with one last thing, because I think this is especially, I know again we have a lot of technical people on the phone or on the webinar, but this is becoming also interesting. So we do a really good job of responding and remediating incidents, but when something happens, and it's always a when, right? And obviously our job is to prevent how bad it is, right? Obviously we don't want it to be bad, but something's inevitably going to happen. None of us we're never going to be perfect. As big of a shell as we can create, as good a response as we're going to have, and I use the collective we, there's always going to be something. But one of the other interesting things that's out there now that we can be doing well is coordinating our managed response to an incident response plan. So when something happens, how do we combine the technical response to what I would say the non-technical response, the communication plan, the HR, the marketing, the corporate communications, the investor communications, the non-technical response. There are some really interesting tools and processes and best practices to manage the whole end-to-end response process. That's not just the traditional technical response and remediation process. And I think that's another interesting area where things are heading when we look at the maturation of the industry. So that's another cool thing I think companies and corporations on the webinar can start to be looking at, and maybe follow up with us to chat in more detail.
Well, sounds terrific. Rob, Bruce, I'm really grateful for your time and insight today. Thank you for what you shared. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Tom. We appreciate it.
I want to thank our attendees as well. As always, you took time out of your day to attend this session. We don't overlook that. We're very grateful for it. I trust you're walking away with some excellent new ideas on how you might reinvest in your own cybersecurity defenses. As always, I look forward to seeing you in one of our upcoming sessions. And until then, for Information Security Media Group, I'm Tom Field. Thank you so much for your time and attention today.